Okay, so this is 340, right? Right? Yeah. Evolutionary computation. Does anyone in here know what evolutionary computation is? No? Good. Because you'll learn now, right? All right, so first and foremost, where do you find the course content? If you're on Moodle this morning, I only just opened up the Moodle course, all right? But on Moodle, you won't find much at all. All you're going to find is basically a link to where all the content is and a place to submit assignments and whatnot. That's all Moodle's going to be used for. Everything else is going to be on the course website. And the course website is really easy to find. Open up a browser, CSCI340.com. That's the course, CSCI 340. It'll redirect, hopefully, because Squarespace is being weird. Yeah, it redirects to a different URL, but whatever. Here's the course content. Okay? CSCI340.com. All of the course content is going to be here. Moodle is only going to be used for submitting assignments. And if you forget the course website, you go to Moodle, there'll be a link to this website there. But you probably won't forget it. Okay, so evolutionary computation. So evolutionary computation is a fairly broad field, okay? It encapsulates a lot of different things. And it can get kind of confusing because we've got like a lot of very similar sounding words and names for things that can kind of get conflated a little bit. But I'm going to do my best to help make it quite clear to you what's what. Evolutionary computation is a very broad category. And within evolutionary computation, you have something like evolutionary algorithms, which are it's a category of evolutionary computation. And then there's other things, like maybe you have swarm intelligence, which we will talk about throughout the course. Anyways, I'm Dr. Hughes. My office is in the annex. Lecture time, well, you found Wednesday is okay. It's in here, but there's Friday and Monday. Office hours is going to be 10 to 11, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. All of the course content, I record the lectures. Sorry, what I mean is all of the lectures, I try to record all the lectures and I post them to YouTube. There's a link to the YouTube channel where you'll find them. You'll also find previous year's recordings of this content as well if for whatever reason you want to look at last year's version of a particular lecture. And here's the course notes. And we're going to work our way through all of these things. All right, these are the assignments. They don't have any due dates yet set, but the assignments are there, and it's going to basically just, they're not going to change, I don't think. And if they do, I'll give you a heads up if anything gets updated in there in the meantime. And also, once assignment due dates are actually set, I'll let you know. Okay? By target, I like to give everyone at least 2 weeks. Usually I aim to give everyone 2 weeks of by the way, the deadline is going to be 2 weeks from whatever. But at the very least, you have access to the 3 assignments right here anyways. And then there's the course outline. And we'll click this real quick just to go over some things. So there's a course description. Prerequisite, you need CSCI 255, 223, or 275. Which one's 223? Data science. Okay, that'd be handy. What's 275? Database management. Cool. All right, and 255 is, of course, like second year data structures, right? Does anyone not have 255? Is anyone taking 255 right now at the same time? Okay, it's fine. I just wanted to know. So there we go, whatever, that thing, class times, website. Most of the course content is going to be on this website. This just links back to the website. Textbook and lecture. This website kind of serves as a little bit between like it's more than PowerPoint, but not a full textbook or something. It's somewhere in between, right? I try to get all the core concepts given to you as succinctly as possible. But this is not a replacement for a textbook or anything. It is also really not a replacement for course notes. In the past, it seems like students, they wouldn't really take notes. They would just be like, the content's there. Yeah, that's a bad idea. You definitely want to take notes. Taking notes is important. Last I heard, too, doing notes with pencil paper is way more effective, too, than typing, but whatever. And there is technically a textbook for the course. I believe It's free online though, like I don't think, or it's findable online, I'm not sure. Either way, there is one there. And the topics we're going to cover, we're going to hit things like evolutionary algorithms. This covers things like genetic algorithm. A GA, a genetic algorithm, is probably like the quintessential, most basic evolutionary computation algorithm there is. It's a form of evolutionary algorithm, which is a subcategory of evolutionary computation. Again, this will become more natural as we go. But a GA, a genetic algorithm, is probably, I mean, people could argue about this, but to me, it is like the most basic form of an evolutionary algorithm. That is not to say it is not good. It's probably also, like there's a reason it's really popular. It's a very popular algorithm, and it's a nice baseline for like everything else, in my opinion. And we're going to cover things like genetic programming. That's pretty cool. That's basically a GA, but instead of what it usually does is it's designed to write programs. So genetic programming is you use like the AI to write programs. And I don't mean like, oh, it's a black box thing. Like, no, it'll write like symbolic programs. And that's just a fancy way to say like it writes code that you can look at and be like, oh, cool. This is pretty neat. We'll cover things like swarm intelligence, representation and encodings, common algorithm improvements. By the way, I don't know why that one's not working. I can keep trying. Maybe left, right. I don't know if something's wrong with that projector. Sorry. Common algorithm improvements, application areas, search space analysis, evolving neural networks, although we usually don't really get into that. That usually ends up being student projects, and technical communication, lecture, written reports. More on that in a moment. Your evaluation. There is 3 assignments. So you might notice this doesn't say like grade or percentage or something. It's called points. And the reason I do that is because they don't go as a one-to-one to like your final grade in like what you're used to. Really what it is these are the maximum number of points you can get for each assignment. And if you add up the total, you'll notice that this adds up to 115. Okay? The maximum grade you can get in your course is 99. Okay? What I'll do is I'll take the total number of points you have, and that'll be your final grade. It's entirely possible for you to get 115 out of 115, but you still will only get 99. Okay? So just to be clear. And the reason I do this is I really like the idea that, like, look, you're not in first year anymore. You know how to program. Okay? In fact, most of the assignments, the marking done for the assignments, don't really care about your code. If your code doesn't work, that's a bigger problem. Because evolutionary algorithms are relatively straightforward. I don't want to call them simple. That might not be the right word, but they shouldn't be a big barrier for someone with at least third year level with some programming experience. It shouldn't be too big of a deal. Most of the marks are going to be coming from things that you do on top of what the baseline is. So instead of losing marks for making mistakes, you are awarded points for doing more. Okay? If you do like the assignment description, the baseline, you will get like 10 points or something. But the assignment will also outline saying like, well, okay, add some improvement or something. And if you do it effectively, you can get an additional 5 points, and so on and so on and so on. What's nice about this is you really could decide today, being like, look, I just want to pass the class. So you're telling me I only need to do, like, if I get like 25 and 25, I got my 50. I mean, sure, you could do that, I guess. Although the project is required, so you have to do the project at least. But you could decide right now what your target is for the course pretty easily, okay? Yeah, each point does equal 1% of the final grade, but of course, there we go. The final project is mandatory. If you do not complete the final project, your final grade will be no more than 45%. Even if you've got like 75, 85, you just didn't do the final project, you're going to get 45. You have to do the final project. Mark breakdown, yeah, I explained it. A big part of your assignments, though, are going to be writing technical papers. Writing your code, like writing a GA, not overly impressive. Using the GA, understanding what it's doing and how it's solving problems and describing what you've done, that's what's important. So you are going to be writing technical reports. Yeah. Certain tasks cannot be completed without some prerequisite tasks, right? So like if you don't write the report, you can't get points for like really good data visualization in your reports. You know, you kind of have to do that first, right? So some of them do like have some prerequisite things you need to do to get all the points. The assignment descriptions explain it all. Submissions, due dates. Do I accept lates? No. If it's due at 11:55 and it's 11:56, it's not getting marked. That's it. Every year, you get the same thing of like, well, come on, it's 1 minute late, right? Well, what about the person that submits it 5 minutes late? Should I accept theirs? What about 10 minutes late? An hour late? Where do I make that imaginary cutoff line? What if someone submits it an hour late and then someone submits it 2 hours late? Who do I mark? Do I mark them all? Where's this imaginary cutoff line, right? And it leaves you guessing. How about this? Let's not have an imaginary cutoff line. Let's stick with 11:55. If it's in before 11:55, you're in great shape. After 11:55, it's not getting marked. That's it, okay? And it would be insanely unfair to have someone who's following the expectations. Maybe they couldn't finish everything they wanted to do, but they knew they needed to submit it before 11:55, so they do. But then you take an extra hour and expect me to mark it, and you get done what they didn't get to do, but they were following the instructions. That would be unethical for me to accept anything late. Marking, TAs you're going to be using for marks. Projects. Each student, I have yet to decide if we're going to do it in pairs, but we may or may not be doing projects in pairs or some groups of something. And if it is pairs, you don't have to be in a pair. You can work on your own if you want. For that, I will give you more details on the final project soon. What I'm going to be doing though is the majority of your marks for the final projects are going to be based on my questions to you. So you do your final project, you give a presentation, it's going to be like, let's say 20 minutes, half an hour long, and then I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions. I'm going to ask you questions in front of everybody else, because it's good to have these questions for everybody. I'm going to ask you questions like, why did you use that representation instead of another representation? What other representations did you consider? Did you use any other genetic operators? Did they work? Did they not work? Why didn't they work? And if you can answer these questions with concrete answers, fantastic. If you answer these questions in a way that tells me that you have no idea what you're doing, it's not going to go well for you. Lecture and lab activity. Well, there's no labs, it's just lecture activities. There's also a part worth up to 10. Lecture activities. Every once in a while, I will have a specific lecture activity. Usually it'll be at the end of some lecture. Which lecture I decide to have these on is whatever I feel like it, right? It'll usually be when we hit a particularly important topic. We'll be like, I want to make sure we hit this really hard. Then we'll have a lecture activity. You will get out a piece of paper and a pencil, write your name, student number, whatever, yada, yada, on the top. And then I will say like, write like a single point mutation function or something, right? And before you think like, man, it's like a quiz, no. Because I'm going to give you like 5 minutes to do it. It'll be based on something we just covered. So if you can't figure that out, you're in big trouble. Like they're designed to be easy questions that you should be able to answer trivially if you're following along. And you're allowed to work together. You're allowed to talk. I don't care. It's not a quiz. It's just you got to be here to do it, and then you hand it in to me, and I do the marking. I'll just make sure I read everything here just to make sure it's clear. The date and time of each activity will be determined ad hoc, just that's a fancy way of saying whenever I want. It'll take place during lab or lecture. Well, there's no labs, it'll take place in lecture. Questions related to important concepts covered in their respective lecture. Answers must be written legibly by hand on a clean, regular sized paper. Don't give me half pieces of paper. Don't get me papers that are torn all out because those frayed edges get pages stuck in them and the pages get lost and then they don't get marked and then everyone gets mad at me for like, oh, you didn't mark, it got lost. You didn't follow the rules. It's not on the right size paper. I am not giving you paper. You have to have your own paper. You must include your student name, number, state effects, email, whatever, and you must be the one to hand it in. No handing in for anybody else. If you do, I'm calling it academic misconduct. And you're going to get 0 on that whole section of the course, not just that one activity, on all of them. You hand in your own, that's it. I don't care. Even if I'm watching you, and he says, can you hand this in for me? And you pick it up, you're in big trouble. Everyone's handing in their own. That's it. No ifs, ands, or buts. If you have a broken leg, wave me down and I'll get it from you. Okay? Yeah, you may not submit an activity on behalf of anyone else. You may not have another student submit yours. Every violation will 0 for all lecture activities. And you must submit to me within the allotted time. I do have a cutoff time. And will I accept lates? No. Okay? If any of the requirements are violated, you get a 0, whatever, whatever, whatever. You can email me questions, office hours, I told you, come to office hours. Attendance is required. You're not allowed to record me or take pictures of me or anything. But of course, I record myself and post it on YouTube. So if you needed to record me, I got you covered. All this content belongs to me unless otherwise stated. If I catch you cheating, I'm going to get you. Tutoring, by all means get a tutor, but remember a tutor is a tutor and that's it. And basic boilerplate stuff. Any questions about the course outline? If you think of any questions about the course outline as we're going for today, raise your hand, ask, happy to answer. Okay? So any questions or anything? Everyone's happy? Awesome. All right. Let's start topic 1. Topic 1 is introduction. See this right here? This picture? Yeah, let me go back. I'm not joking. Here, This is literally the whole course. That's not an exaggeration. I'm not being silly. This is an evolutionary algorithm. This is evolutionary computation. This is it. You start with some initialization, whatever that means, but you start your algorithm. We evaluate whatever we get. We select something, we apply some variation operators, and we repeat that process a lot until we stop. So what does all that mean, really? Okay, so I'm going to give you an example. Imagine you wanted to have a little car, you wanted to design a little car to drive along some two-dimensional space. Okay? Let's say you have this two-dimensional environment and you wanted to design a little car that can go through this. Okay, it's like a video game or something. All right? So how am I going to design this car? Well, I mean, I'm not an engineer. Is anyone in here an engineer? No? Okay. So I'm not an engineer. And sure, I could sit down and design a car, but what do I know if it's good or not, right? You know? So how about this? What if I start by designing 100, 1,000, 10, a million, whatever, a large number? What if I start with 100 randomly generated cars? You know, within some constraints, right? It should have wheels and whatnot, right? But I'm going to randomly generate these cars, okay? Randomly, okay? And then I'm going to evaluate them. I'm going to say, okay, cars, go drive along this space. Do you think those cars are going to be any good? No. They're probably going to suck, right? Maybe some are less terrible than others, but in general, they're not going to be very good. But some will likely be less terrible than others. So what we'll do is we will probabilistically select the relatively good ones, okay? So let's say I take this car and this car, right? And they were both relatively not as terrible as the other ones. That means something about their design was probably kind of good, right? At least not as bad as the others. So if we use this as a starting place, maybe I've got these two, and I change them a little bit, just a little bit. And maybe I take them and kind of mix them together and pull them apart, okay? And I do this repeatedly until I get 100 new cars, okay? Then I evaluate them again. Are they going to be any good? Probably not. Maybe they're not even better than the last go around. Maybe they are just a little bit better. Maybe they're about the same. But I'm going to repeat that process again by taking the relatively good ones, modifying them a little bit, getting 100 new ones, and doing it again. Doing it again. Doing it again. Again, 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 again. I'm going to do this 100, 1,000, a million, a billion times. When you're done, you're going to have good cars driving along that space. In fact, here's a little example of cars doing exactly, well, that one actually started pretty good. Look at that. It's zooming along, right? Let's restart. Let's see if we can start with like a worse set. Right? You look at these and you're like, okay, I mean, whoa. Yeah, it's still actually not too bad, right? It's got this like, oh, okay, it's actually working too good. It's kind of making the, it's still going. All right. So, it's applied some variations to them. This blue one, this is what we call like elitism, where you take the best one and make sure it exists unchanged in the next iteration. We'll learn about that a little later, but it's still going. But we'll see, none of the other ones are alive. Okay, I'm going to restart again, because we're starting with too many good ones. The randomness of, okay, like look, terrible, right? Okay, well some of them were less terrible, so let's say, okay, there we go. Clearly I'm envisioning some issues it's going to have. Again, this is working too well. All right, there we go. So start again. Take the good ones, modify them a little bit, try again. And if you repeat this process enough times, you're going to get better and better results. And really, we generalize this idea to like whatever we want, right? Any particular problem. You want to write a program to solve a problem? What if we start by randomly generating programs to solve a problem? They're going to suck. But you know, if you take the relatively good ones and you repeat that process and that little figure I showed you, you're going to get better and better and better and better programs the longer you go. Asterisks involved there. But if we repeat this, and like, look here, over here, what we can see is the measure of goodness, which we call fitness, is like how far it gets in this particular example, right? The goal is to drive as far as you can. So the further you go, the better you are. And these plots here, this plot is kind of showing you, like what do we have here? Is red the best one? There's no labels, it looks like. I'm curious, I'm guessing red is the best. Green is the average of the population. Population would be all of them, and maybe blue is the worst performing one. But over time, as this goes, I feel like, let's fast forward. I guess it's running the simulation without displaying it. But you know, we can see we're getting better and better and better. And like, look, the whole population is actually getting better, right? The whole set. It's not just one car going, it's now like a suite of cars. Which is another cool thing about evolutionary computation, is that when you're done, because look, when you're using evolutionary computation to solve problems, you're using it because you're out of ideas. You do not use evolutionary computation when another algorithm would solve the problem better. Evolutionary algorithms are in the class of algorithms called computational intelligence. Okay? These are the big guns. You don't want to have to use these things. It's the same category as things as like artificial neural networks and everything that comes in that space. These are the types of algorithms you don't want to have to use. You want to be able to just write a program to solve that problem. And if you can't, maybe you start to jump on some simple machine learning like k-nearest neighbors or decision trees. If you can use those tools to solve your problem, use them. These algorithms take forever to run, use a lot of power because of how long it takes to run. They're very computationally expensive. They tend to overfit. There's so many reasons why you don't want to use an algorithm like this. In the same way, you don't want to use a neural network for certain types of things, right? You don't want to use these algorithms. But sometimes you really are stuck where you're like, look, I'm all out of ideas. This is your Hail Mary, right? This is, you're just giving it a shot. So, you're often using these algorithms to solve a problem that has no obvious solution, right? And a lot of times, these algorithms, or these problems that we're applying these algorithms to, like if you ask the question, like I'm looking for the best solution to some problem, often that's a nonsense question. And I'll give you an example. And some of you in here may have already heard this example because you've had me before. But I'll use the example again anyway. So bear with me if you've heard it. Imagine I wanted to program a robot how to walk. Okay? Now look, I'm not going to start hard coding some functions on how to like manipulate all the different like joints and everything on the robot. That's ridiculous. And other forms of AI, I don't know. But let's say you've whipped out the computational intelligence, right? Maybe you're using genetic programming or something for whatever reason. This is just an example. If we're looking for a solution on, can we use like evolutionary algorithms to come up with a way to teach a robot how to walk? Okay, like I want to like find the program. I want to find the best program for my robot to walk. All right? That's kind of a stupid question. That's kind of a dumb objective. And what do I mean by that? Here's what I mean. Who here knows how to walk? Of course you do, right? That means you have some encoding somewhere, somehow in your brain that knows, that like tells your body how to walk, right? But like, who here has ever like tripped before? Right? Oh, so you suck at walking? I don't know, right? Like, am I better at walking than you? Or are you better than... Is there such thing as, if you take all the humans that exist, is there such thing as the best walker? Is someone like objectively the best walker? That's maybe. It's also kind of it's kind of absurd, right? So if I'm coming up with, if I'm looking for the best function to tell my robot how to walk, I can go and take the best one. Like let's say I let this run for a very long time. Let's fast forward. Uh-oh, I may have overdone it. I don't know what's, oh, okay. The point I'm trying to make is like, I'm looking for the best car. Is there such thing as a best car? Well, sure, I could take the one that makes it the furthest, but you can see that like, a lot of the cars are pretty good, actually. So at the end of the day, I actually have a suite of potential good solutions at the end too, which is a really nice thing about evolutionary computation. Any questions about that? That you will find in this course, you are going to be required to be very reflective, because this course doesn't really emphasize like the code. It emphasizes the underlying ideas. And having a good understanding of the underlying ideas related with evolutionary computation is key. It's going to lead to your success, but you're never going to understand these things if you don't reflect on these concepts, because some of these things are really hard to kind of like truly appreciate and truly understand. So you are going to be required to think through these things. This course, for better or worse, almost gets a little bit philosophical, for lack of a better term. So you're going to have to engage with these ideas a little bit, and the more you do, the better you will be at this stuff. Because if you understand these ideas truly, you can understand how you might want to change them or update them to get better results. Because we're talking about these algorithms at a more abstract level than the underlying code. I'm going to show you some code, right? But I want you to understand, like, what are these functions doing? And what does that really mean? So if this makes perfect sense to you at this stage, great. If you're left going like, I'm still kind of, how do I connect? Don't worry. This is day one of the course. Okay, I'm just going to close this now. All right. So now, having seen that example, maybe this makes a little bit more sense. Start with a bunch of cars. How good are they? Take the kind of good ones and modify them a little bit. How good are they? Take the good ones, modify them a little bit. How good are they? And so on and so on and so on and so on. And then eventually you say, okay, I'm going to stop. That really is the backbone of every like evolutionary computation. They just do it in fancy ways, but if you boil it down at the end, that's basically what you got. So I'm not joking when I say this really is the whole course. That really is the big key thing you gotta have. So yeah, nearly all forms of evolutionary computation follow the same thing. Initialize a population of candidates. That would be like a population is like the set, and the candidates are like the cars. Evaluate the population's fitness. That's how good they are. Fitness is problem dependent. So like in this case, how far did the cars go? Select candidate solutions for the next generation. Apply some genetic operators, that's the variation, to these candidates, and repeat, repeat, repeat until some stopping criteria is met. What that stopping criteria is up to you. Do you just want to say go for 1,000,000 generations? Okay. Do you want to say stop after it converges, which is just a fancy way of saying like the improvements of fitness over the past so many generations hasn't really changed, so we're kind of done. Maybe you want to go until some level of like diversity is hit. There's a lot of different things you can do that we're going to talk about as we go. I am recording, right? Yes. Okay, cool. Okay, and the camera's working. Good. All right, cool. So, I think one of the best ways to start learning evolutionary algorithms is to start by like seeing a genetic algorithm, and we're good to go from there. Okay, so that's what we're going to start with. So, the purpose of this topic is to see a very simple genetic algorithm. I'm going to make the simplest one I can. That doesn't mean it's not effective. It doesn't mean it's not good. I'm just giving you like a backbone template for your evolutionary computation effectively. That's what this is doing. Okay? This is not what you should be doing. This should be like your starting point for everything you do. Although simple, it includes all the necessary parts to make a complete genetic algorithm, GA, genetic algorithm. Despite never seeing a GA before or knowing the intuition behind the underlying ideas, my guess is you're going to follow along just fine. Do not let that mean that you shouldn't ask questions. Ask questions as soon as you go. I hate when students don't ask questions. It's boring for me. So ask questions as I go if something's not clear. And before you start getting like, oh, am I stupid if I ask this question? Chances are if you've got a question, half of the people in the room have the exact same question. So just do everyone a favor and just ask me the question. I can't answer questions if I don't know what they are, so ask. Okay, problem. Now, the problem we're going to solve right here is being kept very simple. It's a stupid problem. You would not use a GA to work on this problem. It's a bad idea. But we're using it because it's really easy for us to understand the problem and what a good solution is and what a bad solution is and whatnot. It's easy to talk about, and we're using this problem for demonstration purposes. So this is because the purpose of this topic is to see how GA works, not to solve complex problems yet. And well understood problems are often much simpler to reason about. Knowing what a good, bad solution is and having an idea of why certain solving strategy will work or not will help us build our intuition around how genetic algorithms work. So with that said, what is the problem? Here's what we're going to do. What we want to do is we want to maximize the integer value of an unsigned binary number. Okay? So find the largest binary representation with n bits. Now, we all know if you have n bits, what's the maximum number? N ones, right? Obviously. The lowest number is n zeros, right? We know this. Using a GA to decide, like, I should have n ones is a stupid idea, but we're going to do it anyways to show and reason about these things. All right, so you will notice there's a lot of, like, I don't want to say jargon because a lot of these words, like when I say search space, if you've got some experience with machine learning, search space is an idea that you should already be like familiar with. So there will be a lot of overlap, but there's a lot of jargon, and I'm going to make sure like I hit those like key words that are going to keep coming up hard. You might be familiar with them already. Great. If not, whatever. I'm hitting them just so you understand as we go. So the problem being solved is basically if I want to say, if n is 10, give me the string of 10 ones, okay, right? For this problem, the search space, okay, is all possible unsigned binary numbers of length n. Imagine you had somehow you had this 2D plane out in front of you, and in it, there was a layout of all n-bit binary numbers, okay? There's probably some ordering to this, right? And we can come back to that. But basically, our algorithm needs to move through this space and find the one that gives us the best value. So it's going to go around and be like, okay, is it here? No, here, here, here. And we want to have this algorithm move through the space in an effective way such that it can find the best solution. Think of it like this. If I gave you the problem of find the warmest spot in this room, right? The search space would be this room. And I'm going to like move through this space. Is it warmer here? No. Like there exists a warmest spot in this room, presumably, right? So I'm going to go through it, and I want to find this. Now, if our search space is nice and our algorithms are effective, sometimes, we can follow a gradient, which is a fancy way to say sometimes something like a hill climber works. Basically, we can play like hot or cold, right? Like, okay, it's warmer if I go that way, still warmer. Let's just keep going that way. And if I keep going that way, and it's warmer, 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 colder, colder. I like this one, right? Now, that would be a nice, simple search space, but often search spaces, in terms of like what we're looking for, are not that nice. That would be like a convex one or concave, depending on for minimizing or maximizing. Often our search spaces are rather complex, but something like this binary number thing is actually going to be a relatively straightforward search space. Just you want to keep going until you find all the ones. But like I was saying before, we're going to be using these algorithms for very difficult problems that have enormous, complicated, hard to understand search spaces. Sometimes search spaces are easy to understand, sometimes they're hard to understand. And sometimes, depending how we're thinking about our problem, thinking about how we're like encoding our problem, will really impact like the topology of our search space. But more on that later. All right, so given the problem, the best solution is obviously a string of n1s. Consider an example with n10. How would these candidate solutions be ranked in terms of goodness, right? Well, look, 1023 is the biggest one, right? 713. Like this is clearly the ranking, right? This one's the bigger number, right? Smaller, smaller, smallest, right? Right. So obviously. So the GA written will evolve bit strings to maximize the integer value of an unsigned binary number. When I say unsigned binary number, that's just a fancy way of saying that, okay? Questions about the problem or anything that we're doing so far? So everyone understands this completely as far as is reasonable at this stage, yeah? Happy, sad? Okay. Realistically, one would not use a GA for this, obviously, yes. However, the problem gives us a good opportunity to play. So before evolution can begin, we need a population of candidate solutions, all right? So we need to start with a set of candidate solutions. There's a lot of ways we can do that, but for us, let's start with randomly generated zeros and ones, right? Get length n, string, filled with some random numbers of zeros and ones. That's our starting population. Does that seem reasonable? I think it's a good one, right? So a single candidate solution is a potential solution to a problem being solved. So a single string of n bits here is going to be a candidate solution. We use candidate because well, it's a potential solution. Okay, we don't know if it's any good or not, right? But it's like a candidate solution. For example, 1011001001 is a valid candidate solution for finding the largest binary value where n equals 10. It's admissible. Representation. Okay, well, representation is a very big deal. And all it means is, how are we going to encode this problem? Now, sometimes it's rather obvious, like in this case. We can have a very deterministic, or a very, direct representation. Basically, I've got a couple of options here, but I can say literally a string of zeros and ones, maybe a list of zeros and ones. However I want to encode this length n, string is a good fair choice. A list of zeros and ones is pretty easy, right? We could do something like that. Great. So that could be our representation. It's some encoding of our problem. When you get to other problems, though, the encoding might not be so obvious, and we're going to see plenty of examples of that. Remember, at this stage, you are not to fully understand representation. You're just supposed to get an idea of what it is and how we can build a GA. We're going to break all of these ideas down as we go. So it's sometimes non-trivial to determine how a candidate solution should be represented or encoded. An encoded candidate solution is called a chromosome. You will find we do steal a lot of words from biology, and we misuse them all the time. So don't tell your biologist friends the words I'm saying, because they're going to get mad at me. But I didn't come up with the words, so it is what it is. So this is an interesting nuance that will be emphasized more. A candidate solution would be like the string, like 1011001001, right? Like that has meaning in the problem space. A chromosome is an encoding of a candidate solution. When you have a direct representation, it's sometimes kind of hard to distill them as separate things, right? Because if I were to say like a list of zeros and ones, you're like, well, that kind of is like the same thing, right? Fine. In fact, it is very common, and I know I'm going to do it myself. It's very common within the space, within the field, where people are mixed, like they're using these words interchangeably. It's very common for people to say candidate solution when they really mean chromosome, and vice versa. That nuance does exist, but the level of importance is most people do kind of mix these words up. It's very common. Kind of like parameters and arguments are often mixed up, right? Even though like they do have separate meanings, but did it really matter, right? We know what we were talking about. I'm going to do my best to get my wording right, but I'm probably going to make mistakes as we go. Don't fret it too much. All right, so for the integer maximization of an unsigned binary number, there's some obvious, reasonably simple encodings. Here, a list of zeros and ones will be used. Thus, the candidate solution, whatever that is, can be encoded as 1011001001, just as a list. I like the idea of the list. It makes things easier programmatically in my code, right? I could just as well use literally a string of zeros and ones. I could use some weird other data structure. I could usually like bits or bytes, whatever, right? I have options. I just like the list. It's simple. So that's my chromosome. We can randomly generate chromosomes of zeros and ones pretty easily. And I want to generate a bunch of like 10 to make my population. A population is a collection of candidate solutions. Maybe I should even say a collection of chromosomes, really, because it's like a set of them, but whatever, right? It's a collection of candidate solutions. So if I have a way to randomly generate one chromosome, well, I can make a population of size 100 by just doing that 100 times, right? I want 100 random starting chromosomes, let's say. So, for example, here is my population. For us, I'm keeping it simple. I'm going to have a list of lists. These inside lists are the chromosomes. The outside list is, well, the set of chromosomes. How long is this? I don't know. Do I want a population of size 100? Well, there'd be 100 in there. 1,000, there'd be 1,000 in there. 10, 10 in there. Whatever. Each chromosome is randomly generated, so here's some simple code to do that, right? This shouldn't scare anybody. Raise your hand if you've never seen Python before in your life. It's fine if you haven't, because chances are, even if you haven't, but you've got programming experience, it's going to be straightforward for you. But okay, cool. So what do we got going on here? And by the way, in the snippets of code I will be showing you, I do, and maybe I shouldn't, but for better or worse, I will be using like a lot of like Pythonisms that you might not be familiar with. I'll try to point them out as we go. I won't focus too much on the code though, because again, the course really isn't about the underlying code, it's about the ideas. And as long as you understand the ideas, you can implement the code however you want. So what is this doing? Well, here's a simple way to generate a population, right? A population starts as an empty list for whatever, I don't care what I is, I in range of population size, assuming population size is some predetermined constant that we set. Do I want 100, 1,000, a million? How many do I want my population? Whatever, it doesn't matter. For some number of times, and here I'm using Python's choices, so this is in the random, assuming I have random accessed. Choices between 0 and 1, and how many do I want? Bit string length, that's like the n, okay? How big do I want my bit strings to be? Like, what's the size of my unsigned integer? That's, again, predetermined before I hit run, right? So in this case, that would be 10. All right? Generate it, save it as a chromosome, add it to the population. There, done. Okay? That shouldn't spook anybody. The number of chromosomes per population, hyperparameter called population. Oh, by the way, I'm using the word hyperparameter here. I'm not 100% clear on the story here, but my understanding of what happened was, like, a lot of times, not that long ago, all of these things would be called like the parameters, or like tunable parameters or something. These are just called like the parameters for your algorithm that you set before you go. But then what happened was, when like neural networks started to really take off about, what year is it now? I don't know, like 15 years ago, 10, 15 years ago, let's say. Like, especially if like you're talking from like the physics side, all of like when you, raise your hand if you have some experience with neural networks. Okay, so only 2 people, that's fine. Basically, when you're training your neural network, all the little values that are being changed inside your neural networks are called parameters. And that comes from like the stats, that kind of like the statistics that underlie what's going on. In the same way, like if you're familiar with like linear regression and you find the parameter, okay? So there became a bit of a problem where people were saying like, well, the things that are like being trained, that are being updated during training of these algorithms are called parameters, so we really can't call all those things parameters, so they started calling them hyperparameters. Now, evolutionary algorithms don't really work the same way, so there's no like parameters being found, but I've noticed that people have started using the phrase hyperparameter, even though it never really came from this field, but whatever. Hyperparameter is the word I'm going to use. It's one of the settings of our algorithm that we set before we hit run, okay? Stopping criteria would be one of those as well, exactly. Yeah. Evaluation. After generating a population, the candidate solutions are often not particularly good, but some will likely be better than others. So regardless of the mechanism for evaluating the quality or fitness of candidate solutions, regardless, yeah, we need a way to measure how good, like how effective our candidate solution is at solving a problem, okay? And we use the word fitness. This is another word stolen from like biology, same like survival of the fittest, right? Like it's that word. What fitness means is kind of this like abstract, like intangible concept, but like what does it mean to be good really is kind of in the eye of the beholder, right? Yeah. So the fitness, in order to determine the fitness of a candidate solution, we use a fitness function. A function that can calculate the fitness of a candidate solution. So here we go. I've got something called value fitness. It takes a chromosome, which is a list. I like type hints, some description. And what I'm going to do, if the length of the chromosome is 0, whatever, we've got a problem. Otherwise, we're doing this. Now, this might spook you. What we're doing is we are taking the empty string, joining to it each bit from the chromosome, and then turning it into an integer from base 2. If you're like, what? Oh, whatever. This is just a quick, very Python-y way to convert a list of zeros and ones into what is its integer value. That's what that fitness function does. It takes a chromosome and spits out like, that's 1023. That chromosome is 17, right? It's a function that determines that. And then in order to get the population, the fitness of the whole thing, well, I mean, we've got a lot of options. We can do something as simple as population fitness, empty list. For each chromosome in the population, calculate the fitness, append it to the list. Great. Now we have a list of every chromosome's fitness. And in this case, it would be like indexed the same, right? So candidate solution 0 in the chromosome's fitness would be an index 0 of the fitness list. 1, 1, 2, 2, and so And we will stop here because we're out of time. But does anyone have any final questions before we wrap up for the day? Okie dokie. I'll see you all whenever next class is, probably Friday. Cool.